Mike Gallagher.
So I was reading about Cliff Sims' new book. He is a New York Times bestselling author. He joined the Trump campaign in 2016. He was appointed special assistant to the president. He's worked closely with this guy. This has been a good week for President Trump already, even though you wouldn't think this, considering the insanity of efforts to weaponize the court system in order to prevent him from being elected. We've never seen anything like this in the history of America. And, you know, from the Brookings Institution, I shared that data with you earlier. Biden is hemorrhaging black voters, Hispanic voters, Asian voters. Jack Smith's persecution has been, postponed indefinitely out of Florida. So good things are coming. So I wanted to hear a little bit about the book, and I wanted to pose a question to a guy that I've respected for a long time. Cliff Sims, congratulations on the book, The Darkness Has Not Overcome, Lessons on Faith and Politics from Inside the Halls of Power. And I appreciate you joining us today here on the Mike Gallagher Show. How are you?
Mike, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Can we start with somebody, you probably know him. I don't want to mention his name because I don't want to embarrass anybody on air, but a prominent former Bushy Reagan guy, very faithful, deeply religious, and he just cannot believe that evangelical Christians can wrap their arms around Donald Trump. He cannot believe this dilemma that he has about faith and politics and Trump. Let's stipulate, let's acknowledge that President Trump right now is having this witch hunt, thrown at him over a supposed relationship with a porn star. He can be crass, he can be crude, he can be sometimes difficult to take. So what do you say to a person of faith who says, wow, how can I, as a deeply devout person, how am I, a man or woman of faith, a Christian, whatever one's religion might be, understand the love that millions of people have for Donald Trump and the expectation that he's going to get reelected? I'm sure you've confronted this before. Do you talk about it in the book? And if so, what do you say to people who are sort of doubting Thomases about the support that Trump gets, particularly from evangelical Christians?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do write about it in The Darkness Is Not Overcome. I think the place that I would start is Franklin Graham probably said this better than I ever could. He smartly said that Trump, the man, is not the best example or picture of the Christian faith, but Trump, the politician and president, has been a great defender of the Christian faith and its principles from a policy perspective. But I love this question because it also sets up an incredible truth from the Bible, which is that God's grace is so vast that there's nothing anyone can do to outrun it. And I tell a story in the book where I was on The View on ABC. And, I was going on there and getting ready to get my teeth kicked in. I kind of knew what I was getting into. And after the interview, Joy Behar pulls me aside and she says, "What's a nice man like you doing working for a guy like Donald Trump?" And at first I kind of laughed it off and said, I'm probably not as nice as you think I am or whatever. But it was a question that kind of stuck with me. And I wrestled with it a little bit because the real question that she's getting at is, how can you disagree with things that a person does, but still support them, or even hate some of their actions, but still love them? And the answer to that question is really quite simple when you think about it. It's easy. I've been doing it with myself my entire life. Paul writes about this in Romans 7. I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing that I hate. I have the desire to do what is right, but not the ability to carry it out. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep doing. In spite of the countless number of times and ways that I have messed up, I still love myself. I still give myself another chance. The amount of grace that I extend to myself without a second thought is only surpassed by the limitless grace that I get from an all-knowing God. And yet I rarely extend that grace to others, especially those of whom I disagree. So that's how I would start answering the question of how someone of deep faith can support Donald Trump and do it wholeheartedly. he has been an incredible defender of issues that matter to the faith community. He put pro-life justices on the Supreme Court. He told agencies and departments, the Department of Justice first and foremost, to stop going after the nonprofit status of faith-based organizations that want to speak into public policy issues. He ended funding for the Mexico City policy, which gave public funding, taxpayer dollars, to abortions happening overseas. I could go down the list of things that he did to deliver on issues that, frankly, a lot of other presidents promised to do and didn't fulfill for the Christian community.
You know, a few years ago, Dennis Prager and I took a group of hundreds of people to Israel, and we were treated to a visit of the Israeli embassy. We were the first contingent to go to the new Israeli embassy in Jerusalem. And in fact, we were there even before the ambassador showed up. The paint was still drying. And it was such an honor to visit that embassy in person and recognize that President Trump is the first Republican president who fulfilled a promise. And they all did it, Republicans and Democrats, to move. And right now, as this war is raging in Israel, and we're witnessing Biden withholding ammunition from Israel, trying to dictate to Israel how to fight this war, this existential battle for survival. I just keep thinking about the things Trump accomplished. And believe me, I've been to Israel many times, they love this guy. Israelis support him and hope that he gets reelected. Cliff Sims is our guest. He's former special assistant to President Trump. And by the way, Cliff, I'm going to get kind of bold off air, and I'm going to talk to you. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would love to host you and this prominent Republican, who again is faith-filled, and put you both on together. He's a good guy. I mean, he and I disagree mightily on Trump. He loathes this man, just like Paul Ryan does, just like so many other prominent Republicans do. They've turned against him. And I mean, Paul Ryan admitted this week that he's essentially going to vote for Biden. He said, I'm going to write somebody and I can't vote for Trump. So, but this guy is a deeply religious man who does a lot of good stuff. He just hates Trump and can't believe that anybody could support him. I would love to put the two of you on because I'll bet you there would be a thoughtful dialogue about this very difficult issue. And it is a complicated issue because you know what? Trump is not a perfect vessel. Either was King David. I mean, right? This past Sunday in church, the pastor, Charlie Boyd, over at Greenville Fellowship, held a sermon talking through the life of King David. And this guy was no choir boy. I mean, and so you think about people like that.
Murderer, an adulterer.
He was an adulterer, a murderer, and yet, we know how it ends. We know how God felt about King David. And so, you just nailed something that this is the part of your book that I want to tackle, the lack of grace with the Trump haters. They'll talk about grace for everybody else. They'll talk about grace. They understand we're all sinners, but there is a total absence of grace for them when it comes to the subject of Donald Trump. Why is that, Cliff?
I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, I've wrestled with that. I've had many debates in my private life with people, even in my own family, who don't support the president. And, I think there are a lot of things I could say about that. But one of the things that I write about in this book is that while I am a full-throated Trump supporter, I've worked for him twice, and would hope to work for him again when he wins the presidency in November. But one of the things that I realized with people of faith around this country, no matter where we land on that spectrum of the Trump question, we have placed politics way too high in the hierarchy of things that we care about. Now, don't get me wrong. I've devoted most of my adult life to trying to get conservatives elected, to advancing policies that I believe are most in keeping with God's vision for righteousness and justice on this earth. But I closed the book by talking about how the most important moments in human history were Jesus's death and resurrection. Now, Tiberius was the emperor of Rome when that happened. Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea when that happened. But they were not the central characters in that story. Jesus was, and he still is. And so why on earth would we today make politicians the central characters in our story? So that's something I think that I struggle with, that a lot of us struggle with, is placing. That's where I think we get to a point where we can't even have a conversation about these things. I have tried to go on programs where I know that the hosts disagree with me. They're believers who disagree with me on the Trump question, who refuse to have me on. They're not even willing to have the conversation
Right.
about it because, frankly, I think they've idolized their own position on this issue above having grace for people being willing to have constructive conversations about this topic.
Amen. Boy, I hope everybody gets this book. I can't wait to read it. The book is out this week. It's called The Darkness Has Not Overcome, Lessons on Faith and Politics from Inside the Halls of Power by Cliff Sims. We'll post a link on our site, mikeonline.com, and send it out on all of our social media platforms because I want everybody to read it. And Cliff, I hope you'll come back and join us again because we could spend a lot of time talking about what it was like inside the bunker, inside those walls of the White House. Congratulations on the book. And I hope it's a huge success. Cliff Sims, keep fighting the good fight. And I appreciate you joining us today.
Mike, thanks for having me. I look forward to coming back.
You got it.